Welcome, I'm Geeta Mohan and you're watching India Today Global. There's a big development taking place in Washington, D.C. Trump will be meeting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy at the White House in moments from now. Tomahawk missiles on Zelensky's agenda, but will he succeed in convincing President Trump to give it to Ukraine after the conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin? Zelenskyy is expected to push Trump for more long-range weapons capable of striking targets deep inside Russia. President Trump shifts stance on Tomahawk after a phone conversation with his counterpart Putin of Russia and says could not deplete U.S. stock. This is third Trump-Zelenskyy meeting this year. Joining me now is Rohit Sharma for more on this. Rohit, in moments from now, we will be seeing Zelensky's cavalcade enter the White House. Expectations, what do you have to say about the fact that this is going to be the same room where he was humiliated not so long ago?
Well, actually, Geeta, change of decor for President Zelenskyy this time around. President Zelenskyy is actually going to be meeting with President Trump in the cabinet room and not the infamous Oval Office where he was berated publicly by both president and the vice president. He's expected to be here at 1:15 Eastern. And as you said, I think the biggest thing on the block is talking about getting those Tomahawk missiles, which is desperately needed by Zelenskyy. He, in fact, ended up meeting with the leadership at Raytheon, which manufactures the Tomahawk missiles as well as the Patriot system. So I think that's the most important thing on his agenda. And President Trump, who actually had big 2-hour long conversation with Vladimir Putin yesterday, has indicated that America might need those missiles too. So we'll have to wait and watch what happens. But as far as Zelenskyy is concerned, I think he wanted to come to the US a day sooner so he could meet with defense contractors and try to see if he could purchase those Tomahawk missiles.
Okay, we will talk about the Tomahawks, Rohit, but before that, is this Donald Trump walking a very fine diplomatic balance over here, creating that balance between Russia and Ukraine to ensure that he is the peacemaker in this conflict as well?
He does. He definitely wants to. I mean, even yesterday at the Oval, when he was giving those off-the-cuff comments, he mentioned that he assumed that he would stop this war. And he went on to say that, who'd have thought that he would finish the Israel war before he could end the Russia-Ukraine war. So yes, definitely that's on the cards. He's even announced that there's going to be a meeting led by Secretary Rubio in 2 weeks' time, and he's going to go to Budapest to meet with President Putin. So I think a very important day here in Washington, especially for President Trump, who desperately wants to end this war and has been trying, according to him, he's done everything possible and continue to do so because he wants to stop the killings of innocent people in Ukraine.
Okay, Rohit, stay on with me. U.S. President has reversed his decision to supply Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. Now, what happened? The move follows a phone conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who warned that such a transfer could severely strain U.S.-Russia relations. Now, all eyes are on the very important meeting that is going to take place, but will Zelenskyy be able to persuade Trump to reconsider? Here's a report.
Hours before U.S. President Donald Trump's meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, Trump held what he described as a very productive conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump later confirmed that the two leaders will meet in the next 2 weeks in Budapest, Hungary, to discuss ways to end Russia's war in Ukraine. Trump added that ahead of the Budapest summit, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and other senior officials will meet Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov to lay the groundwork for the talks.
We just had a call, as you know, with President Putin. I thought it was a very good call, so we'll talk about it maybe later. But it went very well. And I thought it was a very good phone call. I thought very productive. But I'll be meeting with President Putin, and we'll make a determination.
The call came amid reports that the U.S. is preparing to supply Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. The long-range weapons could enable Kiev to strike deep inside Russian territory. Moscow, however, has warned that such a move would mark a dangerous escalation in US-Russia relations.
Путин дал подробные оценки сложившейся
The issue of possible supplies of long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine was also discussed. Vladimir Putin reiterated his thesis that the Tomahawks will not change the situation on the battlefield, but will inflict significant damage to the relation between our countries, let alone the prospects for a peaceful settlement.
линии боевого соприкосновения.
Soon after Russia warned against the use of Tomahawk missiles, Trump took a U-turn, announcing that Washington could not deplete its own stock. Now all eyes are on Zelenskyy to see if he can persuade Trump to reconsider.
Well, we talked about it a little bit, didn't say much, but I do say to you, we need Tomahawks for the United States of America, too. We have a lot of them, but we need them. I mean, we can't deplete for our country. So, they're very vital. They're very powerful. They're very accurate. They're very good. But we need them, too. So I don't know what we can do about that.
This renewed diplomatic outreach comes 2 months after the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska, which ended without any major breakthrough in the ongoing war. Since Trump's return to office, ties between Washington and Moscow have been marked by moments of tension and frustration on both sides. Now, with the Budapest meeting set, the question remains, can Trump, who claims to have ended 8 wars after coming to power for the second time, finally broker peace in Ukraine? And if so, will it be on Trump's terms or Putin's? With Neha Kumari, Bureau Report, India Today.
Will it be on Trump's or Putin's conditions? Rohit Sharma joins me from DC. Rohit, what are the terms and conditions over here this time around? Last time it was very clear that he was pushing aside Ukrainian concerns. Then came the meeting in Italy, where he went ahead and considered Ukraine's considerations. And then the conversations and the meetings in Alaska with Russian President Vladimir Putin. What does Donald Trump have in mind when it comes to a process? Does he have a plan in place to take the two countries to a place where they can actually come to the talking table?
Well, very famously, President Trump has been saying it's going to be, peace through strength, and something he thinks and he claims he has demonstrated through achieving ceasefire, the ongoing Gaza, or actually the Gaza is Hamas war. So, I mean, sorry, my bad, Israel-Hamas war. But everybody that I've talked to, they believe that President Trump is trying to pressure President Putin, by suggesting that, yes, I'm going to be meeting with Zelenskyy. I might end up giving him these missiles that he so desperately needs. And then, trying to get something out of it, which essentially was getting a meeting with President Putin to keep the conversation going. On the other hand, I think he's also trying to understand Zelensky's position. Zelenskyy also has calmed down a little bit. He understands that he cannot do it alone. Even European allies cannot do it alone. So I think President Trump is trying to toe that line where, he could probably show President Putin that he is going to be delivering those missiles and yet hold on to it with that threat and trying to bring Zelenskyy to the table. So that's the bottom line. I mean, and the other important thing, Geeta, a lot of people should also know is that the economic framework that both the countries, Ukraine and the US, agreed to. Secretary Bessent recently had a meeting. They also want to start the conversation on the investment fund that President Zelenskyy had agreed to. So that's also going to be a topic of discussion today. And I think President Trump is trying to do both. He's trying to play the bad cop and good cop on both sides of the aisle and see if he can persuade President Putin to come to terms. But as of today, everybody believes that today's conversation is going to be on supporting Ukraine, on getting their missiles, on making sure that they have commitment from Zelenskyy and from Ukraine to have this peace talk going. And third, and the most important one, is persuading President Zelenskyy not to do something out of the ordinary like we saw during those drone attacks in the summer. So those are the things we'll have to wait and watch. But President Trump is trying to play the peacemaker by saying that he wants peace through strength.
Okay, he wants peace through strength, but he also wants something else, Rohit, and that certainly has been part of the conversations, whether it's with Russia or for that matter with Ukraine, or for that matter with any other country, including India, and that's rare earths and Pakistan. We do know that Ukraine has signed up on a deal with America when it comes to rare earths. Could that be one of the cards that Zelensky holds in saying that, well, we are giving you what you want, you give us our Tomahawks that we really need to fight Russia? Can that be a part of the conversation?
Well, with President Trump, everything is deal making at the end, right? I mean, if he's able to do that, if Zelensky can say those things, absolutely. But that was a talk with Secretary Bessent and the framework, the Ukraine Investment Fund that we talked about. I think that obviously will be discussed. It's very important, especially during these times when China has put those export controls over the rare earth elements. So we'll have to wait and watch how that plays out, Geeta. But I think for now, I think it's President Trump that holds more cards than Zelensky at this point in time. Yes, Zelensky can bring those things up. He can talk about those things in a very subtle way, but not entirely. I think it's going to be more of President Trump dictating as to how things would play out today and in 2 weeks' time, and when he meets with President Putin in Budapest.
Okay, we will talk about rare earths and discuss that in detail for our viewers to understand what's really happening. And China does play a role over here. But before that, Russia. The U-turn on Tomahawks came immediately after the phone conversation with President Putin. What happened there, Rohit?
Well, President Trump, again, he basically teased, as the word he said he teased President Putin. Hey, you know what? Do you mind if I give those missiles out to Zelensky? And, obviously that was not welcomed. And then we saw statement from the Russians who said, even if that was the case, we'll still win this war. But the bottom line is, I think it provides Ukrainians with a long-range missile that could do more damage than what they have been able to do in all these years. And what changed? I think that call between Russian president and American president was not scheduled before, Geeta. It was only after the announcement that Zelensky was visiting the White House this Friday was that call initiated from the Russians. So obviously it's playing on the minds of the Russians, and President Putin may have, we do not know, may have told President Trump that it would not be such a nice thing if the Ukrainians end up with those Tomahawk missiles. So we'll have to wait and watch. But definitely, the call was initiated after it was announced that Zelensky was going to be in Washington, D.C., meeting up with President Trump and U.S. defense manufacturers.
Okay, we have 5 to 7 minutes before Zelensky's cavalcade comes into the White House. And then let's just discuss rare earths, because that's very important. And Russia has a very important partner. Pressure tactics in global politics works very differently. We're looking at China, Russia's friend, that holds control of most of the rare earth minerals across the world. Now, on Statecraft, we discuss what America's real weakness is and how Beijing understands that and has a hold on that. That's rare earth minerals. Watch. China has just found the United States' Achilles heel, and it isn't in Washington, Silicon Valley, or the Pentagon. It's deep underground, in the form of 17 metallic elements the world calls rare earths. Beijing has weaponized its dominance over these minerals to squeeze America where it hurts most: defense. Missiles, jets, submarines, satellites all depend on Chinese processed rare earths. Beijing calls it national security. Washington calls it economic warfare. The truth? It's both. Because in this war for global supremacy, whoever controls rare earths controls the battlefield. The question now is, can the world's mightiest military fight back when its weapons depend on China's minerals? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. The context is stark. China controls roughly 90% of the world's rare earth processing, and President Trump's new trade war has just triggered a strategic counterstrike. In response to his 25 to 50% tariffs on Chinese tech, Beijing has restricted exports of gallium, germanium, and other minerals vital for semiconductors, radars, and missile systems. The move exposes a hidden truth. America's F-35s, Tomahawk missiles, and Predator drones all run on Chinese processed elements. Beijing hasn't fired a single shot, yet it's hit the Pentagon where it's most exposed. Is this the new face of 21st century warfare? Minerals as missiles. Rare earths are the invisible fuel of modern power. They make magnets for stealth jets, guidance systems for missiles, and sensors for nuclear submarines. Without them, advanced militaries go blind, deaf, and immobile. The F-35 alone needs over 900 pounds of these elements. A single Virginia-class submarine consumes nearly 9,000 pounds. These aren't luxury commodities. They're the bones of military might. And China doesn't just mine them, it refines them. Over 90% of global processing happens on Chinese soil. The United States has one mine, Mountain Pass in California, but even its raw ore is shipped to China for separation. It's a geopolitical irony. America digs the dirt, but Beijing makes the magic. Decades of ignoring industrial policy and outsourcing environmental risks have left Washington trapped in a supply chain it can't escape. Beijing saw the vulnerability. Now it's using it deliberately, surgically, and without mercy. When Trump slapped massive tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, batteries, and AI firms, Beijing didn't just retaliate with words, it retaliated with minerals. In October 2025, the Chinese Commerce Ministry issued announcement number 62, cutting off strategic minerals like gallium and germanium under the guise of sustainability. But analysts see the truth. This was a geopolitical bullet. These elements are essential to radar systems, semiconductor chips, and missile guidance technology. In short, to the Pentagon's entire operating system. Chinese state media hailed it as a defense of technological sovereignty, but behind the rhetoric lies a message aimed squarely at Washington. You can sanction chips, we can sanction the materials that make them. In the global chessboard of power, the US moved first, but Beijing just flipped the board. Now, every American defense contractor from Lockheed to Raytheon faces the chilling reality that their next missile might depend on Beijing's approval stamp. The US spent decades mastering digital warfare but neglected material sovereignty. Under Biden, early efforts to rebuild rare earth supply chains stalled amid environmental protests and high costs. Trump's America First supply chain plan promised revival, but it's crawling. The Pentagon's projects in California and Texas are bogged down by chemical waste hurdles and astronomical costs. Washington's military-industrial complex, worth trillions, now hinges on materials mined and processed by its top rival. Even a short delay in REE exports could ripple through production lines for jets and submarines. The mighty Pentagon, whose budget eclipses the next 10 militaries combined, now faces a supply chain chokehold from a single ministry in Beijing. The balance of power isn't shifting on the battlefield, it's shifting in the refineries. This isn't the first time Beijing has used minerals as weapons. In 2010, China suspended rare earth shipments to Japan during a maritime dispute, and Tokyo buckled under the pressure. Fast forward to 2025, and Beijing has perfected that tactic on a superpower scale. It's no longer about fishing rights or disputed islands. It's about shaping the global order. By controlling the world's rare earth valves, China can now decide which economies and armies can function. Trump's tariff war has met its match, a minerals war. The US still imports roughly 70% of its rare earth compounds from China. Every speech about America First now echoes with the question, can America be first if China controls the materials behind its might? The fallout extends beyond Washington. Europe too depends on Chinese REE imports. Automakers, smartphone firms, and turbine manufacturers across the West are reeling. Prices are spiking, production is stalling, and investors are panicking. Beijing's control isn't just a Chinese advantage, it's a global reality. Western powers that dismissed industrial policy as outdated are now discovering the price of complacency. One can call this the rare earth trap, an elegant phrase for a brutal truth. Green energy and military defense now share the same bottleneck. The world's transition to sustainability runs through the same pipeline that fuels its weapons, and China owns the valve. The flags are out and the presidential guards are also in place. So in moments from now, the gates at the White House are going to open up to Zelenskyy. Rohit Sharma in DC reporting live on what's happening on the ground. Rohit, the flags are out, door ajar. It seems like the president of Ukraine will be received at the White House in just moments from now. Any information on whether if President Trump is going to come out and receive him, or is this going to be a moment where he will decide to sit in that cabinet room and wait for Zelenskyy?
Well, it's expected he's going to come out, Geeta, from those doors and greet President Zelenskyy. He's done that both times in the past too. So we expected that he's going to be out there. He would be greeting President Zelenskyy. He was listening to music. That is, President Trump was listening and blasting the music right now, like up until 5 minutes ago. So, and then we also have a list of who's accompanying President Zelenskyy. We've got the names now. It's going to be the head of the office, Andriy Yermak, Secretary of National Security and Defense, Rustem Umerov, First Deputy Prime Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Kalestka, and Ambassador of Ukraine to the US, Olga. So these are the people accompanying Zelenskyy in to the White House. We'll see President Trump from those doors, probably welcoming him again. And it's important to also note, Geeta, that as I was saying before, the meeting is not going to be in the Oval. And we've been told that there might be some press allowed in the cabinet room where the meeting would be held, but this is not going to be in the Oval Office. The images and the videos of which went viral all over the world. It's going to be a lunch-focused meeting, after which the President Trump is going to go back to Florida at Mar-a-Lago. So I have to wait and watch. There is no press conference as such, but we've been told that Zelenskyy might be speaking and he might engage with the press after the meeting. So right now, I think we're waiting for President Zelenskyy to make his way from the Blair House into the White House so that President Trump can greet him. And then we'll see those images of them, talking, and we'll have to see, how that's taken, how warm of a welcome it is from President Trump this time around.
Well, it is that time of the week, Rohit. It's Friday. It's time for him to do what he does every weekend, head to Mar-a-Lago. But just talking about Zelenskyy coming in, we know that, again, he wore a suit last time he met President Trump. But the first time he met President Trump at the Oval, at the White House, he was in his fatigues, war fatigues. Is there going to be a shift, a change? He's a continuum in how he dresses up? Or are we looking at a pushback? Because he does not have the room for that anymore.
Went pretty well, from the first one. So I think he should follow the same protocol. I mean, if anybody's advising him, they would want him to suit up, look presidential, as some people have said in the past, and meet President Trump, with that same level of respect is what a lot of people had said, that it was, possibly Zelenskyy did not respect the White House or the Oval Office because he said, he was not going to show up in a suit and, war president and whatnot. But I would expect him to wear the suit, Geeta. The other important thing is he would not want to sort of do anything to disappoint President Trump or his, or people around President Trump. So we're talking about the Tomahawk missiles and, all the stuff that why he needs it, why Russia doesn't want him to get hold of it. One of the things that I just got from a source that I was talking to, they said they might, President Trump believes he will make a decision after a meeting with Zelenskyy. But the concern, with some of the people at the Pentagon is that they think that Zelensky or Ukrainian people might misuse it. So I think that's the concern coming up, and that's why probably President Trump is not as committed to giving those missiles to President
Right.
Zelensky, but he's going to make a decision right after meeting Zelensky.
Right, Rohit, you continue being here, but it's time for me to end this show. We will be on the story after a short break when President Zelensky arrives at the White House. Time for a short break. Stay tuned for more on the other side. Goodbye and take care.